On Saturday, the 6th of May, the coronation of King Charles III will take place here in London. The Archbishop of Canterbury has asked everyone to pledge allegiance to the king. But should Muslims in Britain give their allegiance to the new Christian king? The BBC today reports that the order of service will read, quote, all who so desire in the Abbey, that's Westminster Abbey here in London, and elsewhere, say together, I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God, end quote. And the BBC goes on to quote a guy called Graham Smith. He's a spokesman for Republic, who campaigns for replacing the monarchy with an elected head of state. And he said, in a democracy, it's the head of state who should be swearing allegiance to the people, not the other way round. This kind of nonsense should have died out with Elizabeth I, not outlived Elizabeth II, end quote. Now, in this video, I do not intend to advise Muslims to support or oppose the monarchy or to tell anyone what to believe. There's a whole issue of swearing allegiance to the king, and this has never been done before, not for the whole population. Yeah, for the people in the Abbey, yes, for previous monarchs, but not for the whole of the UK. This is the first time. So I asked a friend of mine who's very well trained in the Islamic sciences, not a scholar himself, but he works closely with scholars and is extremely knowledgeable. I asked him to give me his opinion, his view, and he wouldn't give me a fatwa, of course. But what he said is the following, and I got permission to quote some of his words. And he said to me, what is absolutely clear beyond any doubt that it is categorically forbidden for a Muslim to have allegiance, love, loyalty, or obedience in an absolute sense to any other than Allah. This unqualified absolute obedience only belongs clearly to God alone. The question is, he said, can we have partial or limited loyalty, obedience, and allegiance to a non-Muslim sovereign? Moreover, does such an allegiance automatically entail or imply endorsing all of the history, traditions, and values that the sovereign represents or symbolizes? If we break down the issues of giving conditional obedience or allegiance to other than Allah, specifically to non-Muslim entities, it might help us arrive at a just and well-informed Sharia or theological rule, inshallah. One last consideration, he says, can we make a justifiable analogy between a bay'ah, this is an oath of allegiance Muslims give to a Muslim head of state, such as a caliph, or emir, sultan, king, or president, with a pledge of allegiance to a non-Muslim head of state? Partial obedience, he says, to political authority, be it Muslim or non-Muslim, with the meaning of not violating the laws of the land or violating public safety and security, is a clear obligation in our Sharia, he says. About this, no Muslim jurists disagree. And then he goes on a personal non-fatwa note, while he says I'm neither a solid royalist or a die-hard Republican, I do admire many aspects of the monarchy that Queen Elizabeth embodied: dignity, respectability, a sense of godliness, dedication to duty and service, and thoughtful consideration of the modern world. Of course, there are things, he says, I hate for Allah's sake too in the monarchy. And then there are personal dislikes, particularly the pomp and pageantry. But on balance, he says, I admired past tense, the monarchy. My gut feeling is modern Britain will eventually perhaps need to move on from monarchy. Given that the coronation ceremony is at root a religious one, and indeed it is a Christian ceremony, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury is there, I'm not sure Muslims should freely partake of it or swear an allegiance that isn't required of them. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, has invited people, but we're not told we must give our allegiance to the new Christian king. And he says, going out of our way to add our religious endorsement as people of Tawheed, believing in the oneness and unity of God, where no public endorsement has been required of us, need not be done. And then my friend then mentions what the Pledge of Allegiance actually says. There's a call for us to pay true allegiance to the king and to his heirs and successors. And then he says, and this is a crucial sentence, I think, Islamically, this is an unacceptable pledge and homage, or highly problematic at best, as it is unrestricted and too general. This is a very interesting objection he has. It might not be the obvious one. Okay, it's a Christian king, Muslims shouldn't give their allegiance to him. But this friend of mine is making a very interesting point. It's unrestricted, it's unconditional, too general, he says. The generality is not something Muslim believers should ever feel comfortable with, not even to a bona fide Muslim caliph, or for that matter, to one's parents. Such dedication beyond matters of upholding the law, which such a sovereign is a symbol of, is questionable. And then he says, Allah knows best. So I think that's a very nuanced, carefully worded assessment. He's saying that it's the unconditional nature of the allegiance to a Christian king or any ruler that is questionable. And of course, we're not supposed to just obey. The Quran makes it clear that we're to obey people in their lawful commands. But if we're commanded to do something that goes against the commands of God, then we're not to do so. We're to disobey. And that's stated clearly in the Quran. So my friend is not saying anything new, anything different. But whether or not Muslims should be given their allegiance to a Christian king at all, given that Christianity in many Muslims' eyes, or in the eyes of Islam, is a religion that has gone astray in many ways and left the teachings of Jesus, upon whom be peace, by obviously worshipping him as a god, and that is shirk, which is extremely serious form of idolatry in Islam, as it is in Judaism. The Jews feel the same way about that. Whether or not we should give allegiance anyway to that person is, of course, very much a matter for personal decision, and is not my place, as I've said, to tell people what to do or what to believe. But there's one final thought, really, which worries me more than anything else, I think, about this, and it hasn't happened so far, I think, I could be wrong, but I've not seen it yet, is that some groups of people may weaponize this call to allegiance. I'm thinking of certain Islamic groups or certain hardcore extreme Christian groups who may weaponize this call in a way to attack Muslims, to question their loyalty, to question their right to be in Britain, question their Britishness. You know, this test of British values. If this becomes a litmus test for our place in this country and is used to attack us, to attack Muslims, then I think that will take a very ugly turn. But I've not actually seen that happen yet, and God willing, it won't happen. So should we give true allegiance? The view of my friend, at least, is because it's so general and unconditional, we shouldn't be doing that. We should give allegiance to the lawful authority. And this is something that many people in the West perhaps are unaware of, that the Sharia does require, the divine law requires Muslims living in places like Britain or France, Germany, America, in the West, to obey the law, to be good citizens, to be good and kind to their neighbors, to obey lawful authority, as long as it doesn't go as far as requiring people to violate their consciences in terms of, for example, if the state required us to eat pork or drink alcohol or to commit other egregious crimes, then people of conscience have to not follow through with that. And there's nothing particularly unique to Muslims in that. Christians also would conscientiously object, as would Jews and other people too. So this is not something unique to Muslims. But Muslims have a very clear deen, a code of life, a way of living. It's not just a religion in the Western sense of a private faith. It's a way of life, which requires, as I say, us to respect the law, obey the law, as long as it doesn't require us to violate and go against God's law, which, God willing, it hasn't, I don't think, required us to do it in the West so far anyway. So there we are. Those are my thoughts. Whatever you do next Saturday, I hope you have a good day, inshallah. Until next time.